Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 310, and we're going to talk about a variety of things, mostly about workers' rights, but also about Cooper DeJean, who is a cornerback for the Philadelphia Eagles football team. They just won the Super Bowl, and I had some things to say about that. All right, so to follow up, a lot of what I say, because it's a daily podcast and I have two other jobs, a lot of what I say is on the fly. And sometimes some things come to me after I record an episode. So yesterday I was talking about whether or not we really wanted an efficient government. But I should have added that it is the nature of government to be inefficient. And this is because they're corrupt, right? But also, uh, it's their inefficiency which allows them to waste and potentially commit fraud and money laundering, right? So they want to be inefficient, right? Because all of that gray area allows them to be able to be wasteful, for whatever reason. Milton Friedman said, "No one spends somebody else's money as carefully as he spends his own. Nobody uses somebody else's resources as carefully as he uses his own." So if you want efficiency and effectiveness, if you want knowledge to be properly utilized, you have to do it through the means of private property, end quote. So basically, when after Doge, if they are able to proceed, I know that they're having some labor hiccups and people are throwing the Constitution at them conveniently, hypocritically. If they actually are able to do more of what they have been doing, then they have to replace it with individual liberty, right? If you really want to get rid of waste, then you have to replace it with individual liberty, no government at all. And so there is a lot of cutting that needs to be done. Food for thought, anyway. And I know there's a lot of people, maybe you're not full-blown anarchists, but that really is the way to go. No one can control your life, make decisions for your life better than you can for yourself. Now, children, of course, they are the responsibility of their parents, and that's what they are charged with doing, making sure that their kids will be equipped with the knowledge they need to be able to live a good and healthy, prosperous life. So I was listening to, I listen to Jimmy Dore a lot, and I love like 80%, I guess, of 90%, 89% of the things that he says. And the 10 to 20% is when he drifts into workers' rights. And really irks me every time he goes there because I don't, whether he realizes it or not, but he is waxing hypocritical. I saw him do it the other day when he sort of, um, you know, when Doge was cutting and he was going over where the resistance was coming from, it was a union, right? It was a labor union, of course, a government labor union that was blocking it, but he made no mention of it, right? So they're workers. And so when he goes into workers' rights and he wants to champion workers' rights, which worker is he talking about? I've talked about who protects the worker and workers' rights in different ways in episode 252 and episode 275. And there I go into a lot more detail about, the free market and how it protects the worker through freedom, right? It's not job security that workers should be fighting for, but job mobility, right? So if you don't like one job, you're free to find another job. You are not tied to a job because of the insurance plan. You're not tied to the job because of the pension plan, and those are government jobs as well. The only jobs really that still have pension plans are government jobs. Teachers are government jobs, right? So, once you put in a certain number of years, you don't want to start all over. And so you're tied to that job, to that location. So there is no job mobility, right? And so you're stuck. And what you would rather want is a situation where You don't care about so much job security because you're always looking for a better job, a job that is paying better, a job that is offering more compensation, better working conditions, right? And that is what a worker is looking for, which means that employers must always provide that. And so they're going to try to attract the best workers to work for them, right? And so they are allowed to discriminate extremely heavily in favor of better workers against lazy workers, right? And in this way, the company becomes better, but it also inspires workers to work harder. And so it's a system, the free market system when it comes to workers protects everybody, the employer as well as the employee. And so when he says, when he champions the worker, unless I missed the episodes where he goes into it in detail, which workers, right? Which worker does he want to support? Because in a way, all of it, unless you are a CEO, unless you are the owner of a company, but even most companies are a company of one, right? So you are the worker, right? You're the owner and you are the worker, right? So who are we really talking about? Which worker, right? So we're protecting workers against whom? Right? Who are we protecting them against? And the answer to that is other workers, right? And so if you imagine, how he talks about certain jobs that are well-paying jobs, and he wants to protect them against other workers who are willing to work for less, other workers who are working for other companies, right? And so it's that generalization. And so what we have to realize is that this idea of worker, it's a racialization, it's a generalization. And this goes into my race theory, right? And just as a reminder, all race is a generalization using a single identifiable characteristic. It is not just applied to people, it's applied to concepts, applied to products, right? Anything that can be generalized can also be racialized, right? So people who say, oh, I don't like capitalism, right? Well, you've generalized, right? You think you know what it is. Stereotypically, you're going to assign it certain characteristics. Whether it's true or not is besides the point. That's how you understand that category, that generalization. And so, without ever really going into depth, to say that he's championing workers, well, it's a generalization, right? Because if he were to explain it some more, then he'd be stuck in this awkward situation where he is going to defend these workers against those workers. And so then when you're all obsessed about the worker, then who protects the employer? And so if you can imagine that if you live in a society that is biased towards workers, then employers are going to try to seek some protections. And that's going to be through government, through regulations. And here we are, right? This is the society that we live in. So you see all these workers organizing, unionizing to try to get more from their employer. So the employer then says, hey, if you're going to protect these unions and you're going to make it legal for unions to strike and to do violence against my company to get what they want, well, then I want protections myself. Like I want my competition to be closed down, right? So, for example, and so that's how you have protectionist laws in the country where foreign competition or even domestic competition is strictly and severely limited. That way you can provide your employees what they wanted. But of course, unions, the life and death of unions rise and fall with the economy and with the legislation, right? And so you can strike yourself out of a job. And it happens all the time. You demand too much and you basically kill the host. You bankrupt the company because you're demanding too much. One of the examples that I've used in the past is Trump Casino, the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. One year I was there and all the hotel workers were striking out in front. And I can't find the picture, but I told my kids to pose in front of the strikers at a distance, don't worry, because I wanted them to remember that these guys who are striking will be out of work soon. And sure enough, within a month, they were all out of work because what they were demanding could not be met. And the owner of the hotel was just going to close the hotel. And that's in fact what he did. He sold it off. He sold all the furniture. You could buy the plants if you wanted. I remember they were having this sort of fire sale, getting everything must go kind of thing. And so workers can strike themselves out of work, right? And so um, that's something that they have to balance, something they always have to keep in mind. And we can use Henry Ford as an example of how workers naturally, through job mobility, they can get protection, right? And so Henry Ford, because his turnover of workers was was normal. I guess it was like any other company. And so a lot of them, if they quit after they trained them, then you have to train new workers all over again. And he didn't want to do that, right? He wanted a steady workforce. And so what he had to do was he had to pay double. I think he was paying double the national average in wages to his workers, right? They were among the highest paid workers in the country because he wanted to retain them. And that's what you need, right? You need some kind of incentive uh, laid out by the company itself, by the employer, so that it's fair. Once you introduce government regulations, that's when everything goes sideways and it goes nuts. Okay, and so it's just sort of something, again, I thought I would mention, that if you keep talking about it, if you keep thinking about it, then you have to realize that you're not going to protect all workers. You're just going to protect some workers against other workers. Well, what's wrong with the other workers, right? Where is their advocate, and that becomes the sort of, you drift too close to hypocrisy for my taste, which is why I would much rather always go back to the free market argument. Just want to mention that Pete Hegseth was in Germany yesterday, and he skipped a meeting of, what is it, a Council of NATO people for Ukraine affairs, right? He skipped that meeting and worked out with, American troops that are in Germany. But he gave a speech, right? More importantly, he gave a speech, right? So skipping that meeting was like, what? America usually chairs the meeting, right? Leads the meeting, oversees the meeting, but he skipped a meeting. He's like, you guys do it yourself. And then he said the next day that Ukraine should not be in NATO. Well, that's what they've been fighting about all this time, right? That NATO and the United States have been trying to get Ukraine into NATO, and this is what really upset Russia, among other things. And so they're like, no, that is a non-starter. It's not going to happen. And so Hegseth says, in this weird twist of foreign policy, he says, yeah, Ukraine is not going to be in NATO. And if NATO countries want to send peacekeepers or troops into Ukraine, well, if they die, if they get attacked and they die, it will not count for Article 5. And Article 5 is that clause in the NATO agreement that an attack on one country is an attack on all. But if Ukraine is not part of NATO, then having NATO troops in Ukraine doesn't count for Article 5. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, coincidentally, was approved for Director of National Intelligence, which I believe is in charge of giving military reports to the president, right? I believe that's what it is. So she takes all of the information from all of the, military related operations and then presents a report to Trump. I am hoping that that's what Trump was waiting for, her confirmation, so then he can start being more public about his true intentions about his foreign policy, right? Because so on the one hand, it looks like, oh yeah, we'll continue everything. But on the other hand, he's a business person, and a business person knows that war is the absolute worst thing. And I think and he said it. He's been very vocal. He's very anti-war. He wants the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay. I've heard him say that. And so you don't get the Peace Prize unless you're Obama, your last name is Obama, for starting wars. That's not how it's done. It's by ending wars that you get the Peace Prize. That's what Trump wants. And so I'm very suspicious about this. A lot of this pro-war, the pro-war appearance of his cabinet, right? And so I'm hoping beyond hope that Tulsi Gabbard gets in there. She'll say, "Oh, now I'm seeing the real numbers, and yeah, we got to end all of this, right?" And that's what I'm hoping. The Pentagon is said to be next on the audit list of Doge. So perhaps that Tulsi Gabbard, with the Doge audit of the Pentagon, will be the justification for Trump to end all foreign adventurism, right? Overseas adventurism. That would be very cool, but that's what's going through my mind. I wonder if that's not part of what's going on in Trump's mind. Again, I think he's a lot more complicated than people give him credit. And finally, I do want, whenever anything comes up that is related to race, I always got to say something, right? Something pops in my head, right? Because that was my graduate work. It was mostly about race theory. So, if you don't like American football, you can stop listening now. But the Philadelphia Eagles, my home team, I guess you would call, right? The team in my area, they won the Super Bowl, and yes, a lot of Philadelphians destroyed their city. I don't know if you saw that meme where it was a false dichotomy. Eagles win, destroyed the city. Eagles lose, destroy the city. It's hilarious because it's true, right? But anyway, so Cooper DeJean is a cornerback for the Eagles. He did a pick six. He intercepted a pass and he ran it in for a touchdown. It's a very big deal, and have done it in the Super Bowl as a rookie on your birthday, wow, it's pretty awesome. But I don't think that's why he's getting all the attention that he's getting. He's getting all that attention because he's white, right? It's a very rare thing to have a white person, right, as opposed to African American, as your cornerback, because the cornerback has to be super, super speedy, fast, be able to keep up with all the super fast, speedy receivers, right? And so it's kind of rare to see a white person as a cornerback. And so I Googled it, and it is said that the number of white cornerbacks in the NFL, the National Football League, American football, is 0.73%, right? Is less than 1%. And currently there are two, uh, uh, you know, uh, what do you call it? Starting cornerbacks that are white, right? And it's Riley Moss and Cooper DeJean. And the last white cornerback of significance was Jason Sehorn, and I think he played for the New York Giants, I believe, 20 years ago, right? And so it's that rare to see a talented white cornerback, And I thought it was just kind of interesting because it reminds me of Rocky, which is a fictional movie about a boxer, right? And I remember when the movies first came out, people were making fun of it, because it's a white boxer, right? And, at the time, I mean, I think the last time there was white boxers in contention for the heavyweight championship is like back, Rocky Marciano, back in the day, way back in the day, like Cinderella Man back in the day kind of thing, right? So the 1930s type thing. And it also reminds you of it reminded me of the movie White Men Can't Jump, right? Because clearly everyone in the NBA is black, right? And so to have a white person who can dunk and do all these things is pretty unusual. And then I saw that Jason Kelsey had says a couple of years ago at a podcast that whites are not even allowed to try out for that position, right? So if you are white, they don't let you try to be a cornerback, which is weird, right? So basically, what we're witnessing here is a racialization of some kind, right? That cornerbacks are black, right? And if you are white, you're not a cornerback. That's the racialization or the racial project or the generalization that I was just talking about. And so it's an indication that there's an expectation. And so when the expectation is broken, right, when there is a surprise, like you don't fit the stereotype, then it's very unusual and it draws everyone's attention. I've talked about this before, where if you're playing a football and you're a lineman, one of the big guys, you don't become a mathematician, right? A math PhD or a brain surgeon or neurosurgeon, but it happens. But when it does, it's so weird, surprisingly different that it draws a lot of attention. But it's happened. Myron Rolle would be an example. And so the real question then coming, I mean, so okay, so people are pointing it out, and I kind of made fun a little bit on social media that, people talking about him like he broke some kind of color barrier, which is goofy considering the NFL used to be all white and then they started letting black players play. So for him to start playing that position to break a color barrier, I don't know. It's just kind of weird, but a lot of people are talking that way. I even saw someone post like he's our white Jackie Robinson, which is the black baseball player who broke the color line for Major League Professional Baseball here in America. So it's kind of weird, right? But anyway, so the real question is, how much are you willing to hold on to a generalization or a racialization, right? So maybe there's someone, what if someone did not pick Cooper DeJean because he's white, right? But another team did pick, right? So let's just say a bunch of teams took a look at Cooper DeJean, saw that he was white, and said, nah, white people don't play that position. And so then the Eagles got to pick him up, right? And so the Eagles got him as their cornerback, and look how much he did for the team this year, a lot, right? And he's only 22 years old, which is really crazy. So you got to pity the team, feel sorry for the team or not, who was distracted by something other than the player's skill. I'm going to wrap it up here. I just want to mention another movie. It's called Moneyball. Great movie. It's about the 2002 Oakland Athletics, which is a professional baseball team here in America. And basically their budget for players is so low. I think it was like one of the lowest in all of professional baseball. And so they couldn't keep or attract talented players because they just weren't paying enough. And so what Billy Beane together with Peter Brand, what they did was with the tight budget, they used sabermetrics, right? And so baseball, it is said, is the most statistically driven sport in the world, right? And so there's statistics for every aspect of the game. And so what they did was instead of looking at the appearance of the player, like, oh, he's got the look, right? They looked at the skill. They looked at the statistics, right? And so they had to go up against the scouts who prioritized the appearance, different characteristics, whereas they went with the math, right? And it revolutionized the game. What is it? The Boston Red Sox started using that method of recruiting players, and they won the World Series a couple of years later. So it works, right? Especially if you have more money to work with. And I guess every team now has to use sabermetrics, right? So if you can get past the appearances, then you can actually look at the skill, right? And so bringing back to the Cooper DeJean and race in general, each of us have an infinite number of characteristics or traits or racializations, right? No one single kind of person, you can read that as color, right, if you want, or skill, ethnicity, whatever. No one kind of person has a monopoly on any skill, right? So math ability, oh, that's only a white person thing. Oh, that's only an Asian thing. No, no. No one has a monopoly. And that's the beauty of individuality. This is why I'm so totally sold on the free market, which basically looks at who you are as an individual, not you as a category or a type of person, right? That's where we get, and if you codify it, that's where you get racism that everyone always complains about. So we develop shortcuts to whittle down candidates. But even that, can be how you do it can be the difference between success and failure, right? But it's not just about human beings that we, generalize. It's ideas, it's theories, it's concepts, it's merchandise, right? Oh, that's Samsung or that's Apple. Sure, that's desirable. We do this all the time, right? And so how we do it will determine success or failure. And all of us keeping aware that these are just simply generalizations. And to codify or legislate based on a generalization is about one of the worst things that you can do. And so the free market always reveals who is valuable in what spot or what item is best used for what purpose. And that's how we move forward. And that is it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.